I'm going to give the right to speak to present the project of law Deputy Maria Gabriela Vega. Good afternoon, Vice President. First, I ask for the authorization for my condition to present the law from my sitting position. Well, good afternoon. Once again, Vice President, dear parliamentary members, today we correspond to present the project in the first discussion of the organic law for the acceleration and optimization of the procedures, the administrative procedures of the public administration project of law, which is an initiative of the National Executive presented by our acting president, teleSUR Rodriguez, on January 15th in her presentation of the annual message to the nation. In this moment, it is exceptional that it lived by the nation. It demands extraordinary measures to strengthen the action of the state, guarantee the well-being and the human rights of the population, the fulfilling of their essential goals, and very particularly the economical development and integral of the nation. That is why, in this sense, looking in the maximum efficiency of the acting of the state is in benefit of the people, because it constitutes one of the central objectives in these times of challenges that we have to overcome, and that are effectively we are overcoming, because always we're going to continue prevailing in our country with the men and women, with the people of Venezuela that day by day go out to do any administrative procedure, whether it's public or private. It exists a general consensus on the necessity of transforming the procedures of the state to do them simpler, faster, deeper, and especially to ensure their objectives. In general, the people are convinced that it is necessary to eradicate rules and practices that makes bureaucracy and that obviously delay unnecessarily the results. Unfortunately, the decree with rank, value, and force of law of simplification of administrative procedures currently has not been enough to resolve this situation that day by day happens. From there, the demand of a new law presented by the National Executive that allows to adopt urgent measures from the National Executive to accomplish, accelerate, and especially to optimize all of the administrative diligences in favor of the citizenship of the Venezuelan people. This project of organic law that guarantees the constitutional rights and is presented has 13 dispositions in which we establish the object, the finality, and the fundamental principles that inspire its content. Likewise, it establishes the attributions of the National Executive in matters of acceleration and optimization of procedures of the state, indicating with precision all of the consequences of all of the competencies of the executive, of the President of the Republic, for what to suspend, reduce, suppress, derogate, and modify procedures, authorizations, permits, and requisites in law, rules, resolutions, providence, and administrative acts, including the necessary digitalization, uniformity, and unification of those. Finally, Deputy, Citizen, President, and Vice President, the proposal of organic law, it creates a presidential commission to evaluate and propose to the National Executive the measures that need to be adopted in this matter, attending wide procedures of participation and popular consultation. To finalize, it is duty to inform that this project of law does not require budget, because the executions assigned to the organs of the national public administration. On the contrary, it's possible that its development saves money to the national treasury. I invite the deputies of this important forum to join in a single voice to be able to approve this law in the first discussion, and for us to go in its public consultation and approval in second discussion, as it establishes the rules of interior and debate of the National Assembly and the pertinent law. Thank you, President. It is all. We're going to give the right to speak, Deputy Alfonso Campos. Good afternoon, blessings of God to all the people of Venezuela Communication Media Plenarium Directive. We are in a moment, exceptional moment of the history of the Republic, and it has been necessary, unfortunately, given the situations, to adjust what we have had to adjust for a long time. It was said by the Liberator in the speech of Angostura, making reference to the procedures associated to the administration of justice. He said it in the signaling that it was an inheritance of the legislations of the colony of the time, when he called it a judicial encyclopedia monster of 1,000 heads. It is surprising that due to the nature, the bureaucracy is part of democracy as well, and definitely something urgent must be done. From the Democratic Alliance, we support this initiative of the executive. We support the spirit of the position of this law, and we will take the observations of consideration for the formulation of the article of this law. Particular case in the attribution that the law does, according to the exposition of the motives, that the law gives attributions to the national executive to derogate procedures, and we must remember that many of these procedures are in organic laws. To suppose an attribution of derogating an organic law goes through procedures that are of the legislative power and not of the executive power. It will be presented what has been observed, but from the Democratic Alliance, we support this initiative that we recognize is for the benefit of the Venezuelan people. Thank you. I give the right to speak to Deputy Encio Angelini. Very good afternoon, Vice President, colleagues, deputies. Well, I am new as well. If truly it is necessary, extraordinary measures for the reality that we are living. This is a spiral with no end. The businessmen and entrepreneurs that just want to register a company need to just sign themselves in 17 organisms to be able to operate the business, and that is a reality. There is a spiral with no end, because when one finishes the last one, it must start again, and or if one is going to ask for a permit to import any product, it needs to go to the minister and then to the other minister, and when the end comes, then it must start again. So it is very complicated. But what I am concerned, and it was commented by the colleague previously, is that I believe that we have to legislate and not give and not give that work to the executive. We are the ones who have to legislate, and we have to approve that law here and not give it to the executive, as it is in the exposition of motives that says clearly the national executive in matters of acceleration and optimization of procedures and administrative procedures of the state, indicating with precision all the competences of the President of the Republic to suspend and do all the procedures that needs to be done. I believe that that is our job, and it does not correspond to them. And the other thing is we need to enter modern times, and to do so when those comparisons that sometimes are very uncomfortable in other countries around the world, one can make a company simply through online, and in 48 hours one has all the permits and even bank accounts open, and that is what is wanted, and we don't have that very clear yet. And to end this, because I want to do this short, the excessive permits drown entrepreneurships, and Venezuelans lose time in that, and it leads to informality and also generates corruption. That is why, until we don't know entirely the text, we're going to observe the vote. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy. I'm going to This military option was used without the authority of the Security Council of the United Nations, constituting then an act of aggression clearly against the UN Charter and the principles that lead the peaceful coexistence between nations. During such aggression, it was done bombings on civilian and military infrastructure that caused the death of over 100 people, including civilians, in the cities of Caracas and the states of La Guaira, Miranda, and Aragua. Also, the destruction of buildings destined to medical equipment. Additionally, it was produced the kidnapping of our father Nicolás Maduro Moros, constitutional president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, who was and is still in the exercise of his functions, together with our mother Celia Flores, First Lady and Deputy of the National Assembly. Both were later moved by the effectives of the U.S. to the city of New York in conditions that were against their right to personal integrity. We must point out that in their arrival to the U.S. territory, our father was injured walking with difficulty and tied in hands and feet. Likewise, our mother also presented injuries and was tied at the hands, receiving a treaty of prisoners of high periglosity. Their conditions was also said by the lawyers that defended him. High Commissioner, the incursion of the U.S. against Venezuela implicated a violation of the imperative rules of international law. In the UN Charter and the international law as well, the international law is unmistakable by sustaining that no state has the right to exercise physical coercion in another state, and this prohibition operates with independence of the finality invoked to justify said conduct. Among the principles that were violated is the prohibition of the use of force and the principle of no intervention contained in the Articles 2.4 and 2.7 of the UN Charter. In the same way, it was an open violation to the right of the free determination referred in the Charter and in the International Pact of Civilian and Political Rights, of which the United States of America is part. The illegal and illegitimate kidnapping of the constitutional president and the First Lady and Deputy constitutes a grave violation to the personal immunity of chief of state and the fundamental principles that lead the international judicial order, including the sovereign immunity of the states. It is a norm that is accepted of the international law that chiefs of state have absolute immunity of persecution, of personal immunity, and of functional immunity in matter. It means both in their official acts and for their private acts, so they cannot be persecuted or judged by foreign tribunals. That is why no state has a right to take out operations that are military or political in the territory of a different state to capture or detain their chief of state or other people without the consent of the state or a judicial base in international law. It also must be highlighted that the immunity of the chief of state does not depend on the political recognition on the part of a foreign state. The practice and rejects the idea that a state can evade immunity just by declaring that they do not recognize the government of the president in question. Allowing such a thing will allow the recognition in a judicial weapon, and it will stain the regimen of immunities. In virtue of all that has been exposed, we come to you in your condition of Commissioner of the United Nations for Human Rights to ask firstly for a public pronunciation of condemnation to the violation of the principles of international law for the executed facts against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela on January 3rd of 2026. Point number 2, a public pronunciation in rejection to the violation to the immunity and the rights of freedom and personal integrity of our father, of President Nicolás Maduro, and of our mother, the Deputy Cilia Flores, First Lady. 3. Demand the government of the United States of America the immediate liberation of our fathers, the constitutional president Nicolás Maduro Mores and Cilia Flores, recently Nicolás Ernesto Maduro Guerra, Joseph Gavidia Flores, Joshua Gavidia Flores, María Teresa Maduro Moros, Josefina Maduro Moros, and María Adelaida Maduro Moros. In the name of my family, once again, we are not going to rest. First, until we see Nicolás and Cilia free. Second, until we accomplish the dream of Hugo Chavez and Nicolás Maduro. As I said, it is not a position. We are here because we raise the flags of dignity, the flags of sovereignty, the flags that our motto must be the motto that Venezuelans elect for the prosperity of the Venezuelan family, and we are going to accomplish the return of Nicolás, and we will win. And the health sector is a fundamental part of the construction of the new Venezuelan, of the decent Venezuelans, of the Venezuelans with education that are going to be a Venezuela world power. Long live Venezuela, the homeland, never a colony. We will win. We have listened to part of the
at this moment to Venezuela, listening to statements of Ernesto Maduro Guerra, who was referring on behalf of the Nicolás Ernesto Maduro Guerra, who was referring on behalf of the family, of his family, of all of the daughters and sons of President Nicolás Maduro, and also first combatant Cilia Flores, that the whole country, along with his family, they are not going to rest until President Nicolás Maduro and Cilia Flores are back to the homeland in a dignified manner. The whole nation is united in a single call, which is the liberation of their president and first combatant, Cilia Flores. This is all for the moment. Stay tuned with teleSUR English. And the government of Colombia considers the 30% tariffs imposed by Ecuador to be an economic aggression. According to statements by Ecuadorian President Italien Noboa, the tariff will remain in place until Bogotá commits to combating drug trafficking in the shared border area. Colombian head of state Gustavo Petro reminded his Ecuadorian counterpart that they have seized more than 200 tons of cocaine at the border and that his country has provided during every electricity crisis that Quito has suffered. Colombian authorities assert that the economic measure violates the principle of regional integration. And the Colombian government announced a 30% tariff on at least 20 products from Ecuador in response to the tariff measures imposed by Quito. The Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Tourism of Colombia states that Bogotá has legitimate instruments to restore the balance of trade conditions and thus protect its productive flow. The authority points out that the trade relationship between Quito and Bogotá has been built on the basis of rules and mutual cooperation, and that if this is unilaterally modified, it alters the current conditions of bilateral trade. And now we go to Russia. On Thursday, Russian President Vladimir Putin met with his Palestinian counterpart Mahmoud Abbas during his official visit to Moscow to discuss issues of bilateral interest. During the meeting, the leaders discussed economic, commercial, cultural and humanitarian development, as well as the situation in the Middle East and the Gaza Strip. Russian head of state Vladimir Putin emphasized his willingness to allocate at least $1 billion from funds blocked by the White House to U.S. President Donald Trump's Peace Council for the reconstruction of the Palestinian enclave. In this scenario, Putin also highlighted that trade between Russia and Palestine continues to grow every day.
You already heard that we are prepared to allocate $1 billion to this new structure, the Peace Council, primarily to support the Palestinian people and to use this fund for the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip, and more broadly for resolving the Palestinian problems. As I've already said, with the asset frozen in the United States under the previous administration, I think this is entirely possible. We've discussed such options previously with representatives of the U.S. administration, and a meeting and discussion on this topic is planned in Moscow today.
In this context, the Palestinian president highlighted the resilience of his people amid the ongoing Israeli aggressions.
Mr. President, we suffer a lot within the Palestinian land. You know this very well. During the Israeli occupation, which carried out a great deal of destruction in the Gaza Strip, as well as in the West Bank of Jerusalem. The Palestinian people insisted that they would not leave their country, no matter the cost. The people of Gaza are now living in tents. These tents are subject to rain, destruction, and flooding. Yet, people are determined to remain in their land. We will not leave it. What we want is peace.
And Venezuela held a memorial mass in honor of those who died during the U.S. military attack on January 3rd, which took the lives of more than 100 people. The religious ceremony was held at the Central University of Venezuela in the city of Caracas. As every Thursday, the Mass was celebrated by Father Eduardo Soto to honor the memory of those who died as a result of the U.S. attack on several cities in the country. This is part of the various activities and ceremonies held nationwide to honor those who lost their lives, both civilians and military personnel. The leader of Brazil's landless worker movement, João Pedro Stedile, expressed his solidarity with Venezuela. He asserted that they cannot remain silent in the face of the aggression suffered by the South American nation.
And when we see the aggression that is now suffering, well, Cuba 60 years ago, but Venezuela, that the empire has the audacity to kidnap our president and the deputy Cilia, we cannot remain silent. And that is why we wanted to take advantage of this meeting with 3,000 and more militants from all over Brazil, to here in a historic square, which was the center of colonialism for 400 years, to shout in a loud voice that nothing will happen, that we are in solidarity with Venezuela, that we will be until the last day to see Maduro free, and Cilia Flores free. That is why we are here.
In addition, João Pedro Stedile described Lula da Silva's re-election as a tactical move to confront imperialism. At the same time, he confirmed that the movement will continue its struggle and proceed with land distribution.
Well, from a tactical, short-term point of view, we have the task of re-electing Lula as a way to even face imperialism. Because after Venezuela, it will be Colombia. After Colombia, it will be us. So we have to close ranks and re-elect Lula. But that does not mean that we are going to abandon our fight against Typhoon. We will continue to take land. We will continue to distribute land to our people.
I'm going to speak to present the project of law, Deputy Maria Gabriela Vega. Good afternoon, Vice President. First, I ask for the authorization for my condition to present the law from my sitting session. Well, good afternoon. Once again, Vice President, dear parliamentary members, today